Welcome to Dialog Choices podcast again.
I didn't talk as say things
Again.
while Keith was saying
Again?
welcome.
Yeah, Dialog
is he-
Choices plus plus.
Wait,
Thank
what do you
Next
mean?
God.
number or whatever, JavaScript or whatever. Actually, just
Dialog
Java.
JavaScript
I
choices.
don't know JavaScript.
Did you
barely
only
know
know Java?
Java.
Wow. You don't know JavaScript?
Uh,
Come on.
I took Java classes 13 years ago.
Oh, you're up to date. That's how it works. That's fine.
I had to
It's
sit
all
there
good.
for a moment and think. I'm like, hang on a minute. When was I 19?
It's been 84 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's getting real close to half my life at this point. Jesus Christ. I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with cutting my life into fractions and having the fucking like college not be the same fraction I'm in now.
When you
Like
reach
that's a distant
36,
past.
when you reach 36 years old, you have been an adult as long as you were a child.
I hate it.
What?
I'm almost 2 years away from that. That's nice. The
When
2
does the
years.
baggage go away from being a child?
Oh, mine is gone. I don't remember anything. I'm permanently
What?
18 years old now. I'm just like erasing the backlog on the way all the way to the grave.
I'm alarmed by this conversation. There's too many things happening that I don't feel comfortable with. What is...
Andrew, do you remember when you were a kid? You
Ye-
do, actually.
I mean, yeah, it
You
just
don't- you
depends
don't
on
use
what part.
quotation marks.
Oh, that's fair.
Like, yeah, obviously, like being a kid is a pretty long span of time. Are you talking like 5 to 8? Are you talking about like 10 to 13? You talking about like 14 to 30?
Like, for example, I don't remember the people that I went to school with unless I met and talked to them after I was an adult.
Oh,
Yeah, I
Oh,
just
that's
don't recall
interesting.
like remember they
Yeah.
exist?
Their
Or just, like-
names, their faces. Like, vaguely, I have some recollections, but in general, no, I don't. Unless I met with them consistently, or one-off anyway, after growing up, I don't remember. Which, I mean, admittedly,
That's-
is still a few people, but there's a lot of people that are just completely
I guess my
gone.
lists are really short. And that makes
didn't
them
go
easy to
to-
remember.
You didn't go to school
That is
with many people?
honestly... Yeah, that
I
I was
went
going to say,
to-
like,
I went to school with thousands of people, but it was like as far as like people you actually interacted with, it was like
Oh, I see.
3.
Oh, yeah. Thousands of people in
Yeah.
the school. My school had like 300, and that was a lot.
That's
They're-
weird.
Yeah.
What?
yeah, that's weird.
That's
300,
like
400.
only having one class per grade.
Oh, no, because the school's like, it's only like 4 grades at most in each school, or I guess 5. So yeah.
I'm pretty sure we went to small schools, didn't we, Andrew? And they were still like massive compared to that.
Yeah, I mean, there was I'm trying to think, like our high school I think had like 600 700 people
Yeah.
at
2,000.
least graduating. What?
Oh yeah,
It felt
graduating.
like
Okay,
2000.
I was like, I was
Yeah.
gonna say like I thought it was 2000.
Sorry, yeah,
Or
it's like
something.
I think each graduating
Yeah,
class
you mean
was
our
around
class
like,
was like 600?
yeah, our
people.
class was like 600 people. I
Your
think that's
class, you mean
I think that's an overstatement. I
year?
have like a
Yeah,
yearbook.
our year.
I have a yearbook. I think it's actually like 300 per year, but like in total, I think there was like I think there's like 1,200 students or something in the in like
It's a
the school
chunky
proper.
amount.
Yeah,
It's one
I
of
mean,
those
you
things
think
where,
there's
like,
4
I
grades.
always struggle. It fucks me up when I think about like the views on like a video or like the views I
Yeah.
get per day or something, and then I calculate that in terms of like, okay, well that like eclipses like everyone I had known in my entire life until I was 18. Like literally every
Yes.
choice I made for my first 18 years of life and every interaction I had and all of those weird visceral emotions coupled with your fucked up hormones making your emotions amplify and shit. All of that combined life experience is less impact on the world than I had with like the premiere of a Let's Play. Which is like, hey, 3,000 people watch this. It's like, what the fuck? How do you think about that?
There was
That is
a
weird. Because it's not a reality that's shared by a lot of adult people. Like, even if you have an important job in a company or do super important things, it still only affect a few people. Like even if you're a doctor, per day you're only going to affect like how many people can a doctor see in a day? 5,000? Do you know what I mean? Like it's weird because obviously it's just a YouTube video, it's different, but the reach is yeah, I understand what you mean, Keith.
I don't understand.
I'm trying to remember.
Work.
There was a really good tweet, and I can't remember who. I can't find it. But there was a really good tweet that had like a numerical value of certain venues in real life and like their max capacity, and then using that to show you like the sheer insanity. Where you're like, man, I hate that I only have like 300 followers, and you're like, this is how many 300 is. And it's like, yeah, it feels like a small comedy club. And it's like, oh, I only got like 1,500. And you're like, here's 1,500. And it's like, that's a pretty good, like that's a big amount. Like 1,500 is a lot of people.
It's a nice hard rock cafe for you to play to. 1,500.
Yeah, yeah. That's like, I would say that's a, I don't know. You could say like a DJ, like a club, like 1,300 people is a club venue. And then you go to like, like, whoa, what about like, I don't know, like 15,000 people. Like, yeah, now you're in like an opera hall or like a concert hall or like at the stadium. You're like, what the fuck? That's like, even that's just absurd. Could you imagine standing in the center of an entire stadium, like a sports stadium, and talking to it with packed seats? Like, that is crazy. I can't imagine a lot of people
on an acoustic guitar.
But like, that's what you're doing. It's like without having I guess you could say Twitch is like that. I guess you do notice the people watching you on Twitch. But I'm saying like on YouTube. Yeah.
But Twitch is more immediate though. If you have 15,000 people on Twitch, like you notice that it's the stadium. YouTube is because it's delayed. Well, it's weird.
It's funny though, because on Twitch, you still don't know how people are watching you, right? You don't know if people are like having you on the background. They're just like on the toilet and they can hear you from a distance. Or if there's like people literally sitting there watching every like waking moment that you're doing.
Scrutinizing every action versus the people that like literally walked away and they're still
yeah.
running.
It's a little bit like being on a packed stadium, but everybody's on their phone.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But like when you're on a stadium, you can tell like those people literally can't do anything but look at you. They can go on their phone, sure, but they're still like in the room with you. Like, they're there, right? You know that at the very least they can fucking hear you. Whereas like I'm watching a streamer right now and they're streaming to 10,000 people. And like,
I hate it.
What? How do you stream to 10,000 people? What is that like? That's insane. Now, but then I look at myself and I'm like, okay, I'm technically watching this, but I'm not. Like, it's muted. I'm not focusing on it, and it's just kind of there in the background. So I'm not watching it. But I'm one of those.
Count or something.
They do
Twitch?
count as
they count.
So they count to the live viewer amount, but they don't count towards. It doesn't count towards. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't count towards drops. Like, you can't get the weird loot crate shit unless you have the audio turned up. But Twitch doesn't give a shit if you're muted or not in terms of like.
How do you? I don't think that's if you mute the tab, Twitch can tell if the audio is turned up. Unless you
Twitch can tell. Twitch can tell if your audio is on or not. Basically, it's between mute and unmuted. It doesn't matter about its volume level.
But it's on the player itself, not the tab. If you mute the tab itself, you can't. The Twitch can tell. I don't think that's
You can mute the tab. So that's what I do. Yeah. It's because I don't because I want the drops. I'm not getting drops here, but I usually want the drops in Twitch, but I don't want to sit there and listen to
I don't think most people even know you can do that.
Yeah, most people probably don't. Or some people don't even use a browser that supports it. I don't know if Firefox does it natively. I know Chromium browsers do. So if someone doesn't use Chromium, maybe it's not an option. But yeah, anyways, the point being, still, 10,000 people, even if 5,000 people are watching you right now live, that's like that's like 7 schools watching you. That's crazy. Like, that is crazy. Like 7 schools worth of kids sitting there watching you. Could you imagine?
It's
what
all
if you
kids
like?
As well? No.
They're all making TikToks about you and dancing over what you're saying.
Literally more
and
stressful
now you
than going to prom.
That's true. That's a good comparison though. That's kind of puts things into perspective. Think of it this way: there are more people watching this podcast. Like more people will watch this podcast than the amount of people you could possibly even ask to prom. Like
isn't there like a limit, like the 300 limit of how many meaningful relationships you can have?
Well, yeah,
like
sure, but the point I'm saying is like some people are like held up and like, oh my god, it's stressful to like ask one person. It's like there are gonna be like thousands, maybe like at minimum 1,500 people that watch a podcast, and that's crazy. You would literally have to ask like you have to ask out everybody in your school.
Yeah.
Like,
so everybody listening to the podcast right now, do you want to come with us to prom? That's the question. And if yes, then we have a
look how easy that was. Colonel just asked 1,500 people to prom, and even if they all say no,
of Chads,
right? Yeah. Even if they all say no, he's done something so much easier or so much harder than just going up to a person physically.
That one Boomhauer bit with maximum efficiency, where he just harasses every woman in a shoe store.
Exactly.
I just ask out like a small country.
A small country of 1,000 people? That's not. I don't think that's. What is the smallest country? It's gotta be the Vatican.
The Vatican,
right?
Isn't that always the one that people say?
Yeah, but it must be also in terms of population, because the other ones are like Monaco. Monaco has a bunch of people in there. Even if you don't account for all the tax evading semi-company things that they put in there.
Wow.
Yeah, Monaco is just basically...
Get any more people, they might have to rename it to Duoco.
Wow.
Really bad. So you got a story for us, Colonel?
I did. Last week, I didn't like it. I didn't like the feeling of...
it?
No, I didn't like the feeling of forgetting my homework that I felt last week.
Oh. Maybe you didn't like your story?
Oh, no, I like... well, I hadn't finished it. That's why I forgot it. But now I finished it, and I'm ready. I have it over here. And you guys can read ahead as well.
Don't use quotation marks.
Sorry?
You don't use quotation marks.
Don't? It's not very common in Portuguese. And also, it's not very common in English to not use quotation marks, but it's... The way I'm doing it makes sense, right? It's not...
Well, it's color-coded. I'm going to have to go back and add quotation marks because it's not going to be color-coded when I put it in the video editor.
Oh, no. The color-coded is just so I can know the voices, because otherwise I can get lost. And I put the colors there. It's the dashes, the big dashes that say at the start of speech. That's a thing in English, right? I've seen it. I've seen that.
No. That's usually that usually is am I using that word right? Probably
Text
not.
Messages.
I don't remember the name of that. The M dash or whatever. The dash.
It's usually
it auto.
Yeah, it's like the dashes are usually there to either delineate stammering, so like, or being cut off. Like the idea that someone says like, and then like you put the line after that.
Yeah.
Or someone
if your
cutting someone
dialogue
off.
starts with a line, it usually means that's like when someone started listening.
Yeah.
Like mid-sentence,
so
or somebody walked into the room while they were talking or something.
I did a weird.
It's a weird formatting, but as long as you didn't use dashes in the correct way, then it probably will be okay.
No, I
then
didn't.
People will
That's
get
true.
confused. So
there you go. I did the wrong thing consistently, so it's fine.
Perfect.
So let me look up the theme, because I forgot to write it down, but I said it last week because it's a city where everybody can time travel, but I just want to read it proper.
Do you have who did that, Keith?
Sasha. Here is a short story prompt: a city where every resident is a time traveler, which is similar to everybody can time travel. And as you can tell, it's like time travel is the worst thing to write about, because the plot holes just will sprout out of everywhere. It's a nightmare. And and yeah, so for me to come up with a premise apart from the city where every resident is a time traveler, yeah, I mean, I came up with it, but it was a challenge. And then I made it even harder because I wanted it to be sort of an allegory sort of situation. So here goes. Can I start?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. I looked out the window yet again into the street as I waited for Brianna to arrive. The sound of Dad and Sawyer arguing was everything I could hear since arriving from work that afternoon. They were going on and on about the same old bullshit, how it was all rigged against the common man, and how shifters were the real problem. Sawyer was a fucking idiot, though. I wish things just went back to normal, Dad would say every once in a while. Anytime I see one of them shifters, I just want to grab my camera and snap! Snap, snap! Chris, you know only pigs can have cameras. If they find out, Sawyer would start in response, without fail. But Dad would have none of it. He loved that cops kept a close eye on everyone, everywhere, at all hours of the day and night. Time travel was a dreaded trick some people used to make a living in our city, but it wasn't easy to do, they said. I didn't know all the details, but the gossip I heard at work was that once you had a picture taken of you, traveling through time, or shifting, as they called it, suddenly became a lot more dangerous. And shifters went missing every day because of all the surveillance cameras. But still, they did it. They would time travel just to have a chance at survival. Those lucky enough to work at a factory or in an office didn't need to do it, of course. But if you couldn't find a job, or if you didn't want to find a job, as Dad put it, you could always shift and bring back whatever you could find. So what if they find my camera? I'm not a shifter. They can't arrest me. They don't need to arrest you. They just need to make you shift, and you're done for. Sawyer had a point. Technically, any one of us could shift, given enough time and effort. Ever since the war, it was just something people could do. At first, it was chaos. The war itself killed thousands, but the real losses came from people trying to get to a safer place, or time, as it were, using this cursed time-traveling ability. They were just gone, most of them, never to be seen again. The few that made it back were the ones that went far enough into the future to see the end of our world, the last remains of human civilization wasting away to the radioactive winds of planet-wide desolation. Nobody ever came back saying they saw a better place. And why would they? Our place was fucked. Our lives were fucked. Dad shouted the same slogan again, this time even louder. A humble life is better than oblivion. You don't have a choice, Chris. You don't know what they're hiding. You think they don't fucking shift every day of the week? Look at their ballasts and tanks and whatnot. He never had a reply. He didn't care to have one either. Sawyer could see the hatred boiling in his eyes. Not the hatred for the government or for the cops, but for the shifters, the freeloaders, as he called them. In his mind, he was doing his best to get everything back to normal, slaving away at the factory, earning an honest living, putting his kids through school and into a good job. It was the shifters, traveling through time and scavenging what they could to survive. They were the ones who were fucking things up for the rest of us. And the government made sure that these freeloaders lived in fear every day of their humble lives. Once they were caught and put in prison, they were trapped. They could either work their sentence off for the rest of their days, or they could shift away from their cells. Simple as that. But because of the cameras, shifting inevitably resulted in death. Time paradoxes, they said. That's what does them in. Suddenly, someone knocked on the front door. It was Brianna, finally. I had missed her going up the street to our unit, somehow. As I rushed down the stairs, Sawyer had already opened the door. Hi, Brianna. What's up? Oh, I love your jacket. Fuck off, Sawyer. She doesn't have time. I shuffled outside and grabbed Brianna by the arm. Sawyer was always hitting on her, even though I told them we were seeing each other. Dad didn't know, and I didn't care to tell him anytime soon. Where are the two of you off to at this hour? Dad shouted from inside. I didn't answer, and just led her away from the unit back down the street. I held her tight to me as we hurried towards the plaza along the broad sidewalk. It was early evening, so everyone was either clocked in or having dinner, and as the red sun disappeared into the horizon, a light rain had started to fall. Brianna pulled her hoodie up to protect her scraggly brown hair from the drizzle. It was an old jacket she wore often, especially in colder days like this. It had a cute little pineapple stitched to one of the sleeves, but it was all scuffed and stained from being worn too often. I felt her slow down under my arm. "Are you okay? You're shivering." "I'm okay." Her voice broke, and she brought a hand to her mouth, muffling a sob. I knew not to push the subject. If she said she was okay, even if she wasn't, I should let her open up to me on her own terms. The best I could do was walk with her back to her mom's place. It was a 15-minute stretch, and we liked to do it together every time I'd get home from work before she did. Today was her mom's birthday, and so I was invited for dinner and dessert. I loved her mother. She was the coolest, knew all these great stories, played a kick-ass guitar, and cooked like an angel. She was also a shifter. Most of Brianna's family was, in fact, but not Brianna. She worked in a factory like everybody else, surrounded by cameras every day, like everybody else. We didn't talk much about work or about shifting. She was afraid of getting caught or slipping up or being overheard. She was afraid of me, I felt, that I would betray her. We had fought about it once. She told it wasn't me, it was her, and that I just needed to give her time. And so I did. And we didn't talk about the subject anymore. "We should hurry. We're going to get soaked at this rate." I looked up at the quickly darkening sky. It wasn't pouring down yet, but it looked like it would soon. "You're right." I couldn't see Brianna's face through her hood, but she let go of my arm and pressed through the boulevard ahead of me, almost running. I ran after her, keeping pace, feeling the light rain hitting my face and hair. It was going to get all messy, but I didn't care. In my mind, I could hear Brianna crying as we ran. I felt her running away as much from the rain as she was from whatever was going on. Something had happened, something bad. It didn't take more than 5 minutes for us to reach her mom's unit. It was a tall concrete building with chain link covering the windows, much like the rest of the buildings in that part of town. Glass was expensive and hard to replace, so most folks didn't bother, especially with thousands of people living so close together. Glass was easy to break, and fires were easy to keep. Her mom's unit was high above, a couple of hundred steps up the stairs, so we caught our breath in the main hallway, surrounded by the sounds of plates and the chatter of her neighbors. "Here, let me help you." I pulled down her hood and wiped the rain off of her puffy face. It was soaked, just as her clothes were, but she wasn't shivering anymore. "You need to change when you get home. You're going to get sick." She looked at me in the eyes for the first time that evening. Hers were stern and cold, an expression in them that I had never seen before. She wasn't crying, but that didn't reassure me. I formed the words in my mind to ask her again, "Are you okay?" But she didn't let me. "You look a mess," she said, mirthlessly. Of course I did. I put mascara on before leaving, which I rarely did. I wanted to look handsome for the party, for her. But now I'd wash it off before I would have to wash it off before dinner. That would have upset me if everything else was all right. But that look on her face told me everything wasn't all right. "What happened, Brianna?" Her unmoving eyes gave a momentary hint of grief, anguish. Her mouth hesitated before answering. "My brother didn't come back from work today." She paused for a moment, never looking away. The work she was talking about was scavenging, shifting, time traveling. "He didn't come back," she repeated. "I think they took him." Her face was stone. Her stare did not move an inch, but mine did move. I reached to hug her, to comfort her, and I felt balls of water welling up and running down my face, uncontrolled. I felt my throat shudder, my mind go blank, and my knees falter, and we both crumbled on each other, surrounded by strangers in the bustling hallway. "I'm so sorry, Brianna," I choked out. "Let's go," she whispered, looking at me, putting on as brave a face as she could. "We have to tell Mum." And then her face fell, and we cried. It wasn't right. It wasn't right that they had to keep living in misery like this. Brianna didn't do anything wrong. Her brother didn't do anything wrong. None of them did. The world was fucked, and none of these people were at fault for that. They were just doing what they could, all they could, to survive, to live and love, and not get taken away forever for the crime of not working at a factory. The pain of losing somebody so close to you wasn't new to her. This happened every year, once or twice. Somebody she knew would get taken away, or worse, they'd simply never come back from a shift. And every time it cut just as deep, and it hurt just as much. But to me it was new, and my reaction was as unbidden as it was unearned. I lived in a nice place, in a nice unit, surrounded by motherfucking trash who would sooner shoot a shifter dead than give them a hot meal. I didn't grow up fearing for my life, and the lives of those around me, reminded every day of how everyone was out to get me. I had to compose myself, though. We entered her mom's place where everyone was already chatting and dancing and drinking. Her mom was her happy, welcoming self and received us with open arms and 2 loud kisses. I tried to smile, but Brianna didn't. I sat down on the old couch by the fire as one of the dogs licked my hand, wagging its tail, and everyone around me slowly quietened down to a murmur, the slow, inevitable, familiar realization dawning on them. They knew what Brianna and her mom were talking about in the other room. They were all siblings, parents, children of shifters. Many of them were shifters themselves, and they all knew what it was to live as one, or like one. It made no difference. But I didn't know. And as the 2 of them in the other room stopped talking, my heart was in pieces. Her mom came through the doorway. On her face was the stony, unwavering expression I had seen on Brianna downstairs. But in her eyes, there were tears.
That got harsh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
How'd you like it?
That was good. I was invested.
Yeah. I like the premise. I would like to know more about the I guess the consequences of like, I don't know. I would like to know more about the consequences of shifting. Like what has caused such a stark reaction? Like what was the catalyst?
For me, the darkness was funny because the prompt writer wrote, I had this cute idea in mind about the time travelers meeting in town center every week and telling each other stories from their travels.
Oh no, it was the opposite.
That's like the
yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think that's what the tone we're gonna get is when like last week Colonel said it's about capitalism.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So to answer Andrew, your question, my idea was to shy away from explanations like that. I thought like if I had to pick up on anything like that, it would have something to do. It would be like a comic book sort of origin story, like the radiation made people be able to time travel or something like that, because it's so prickly. Like anytime you get into the details, even the whole premise of you being photographed and then you can't time travel without risking your life, like that needs to be so unexplored all the time, because the moment you start going into technicalities, you can always rig the game, because time traveling is a paradox always, every time, unless you're only going to the future, which though was not the case here. So it's so difficult to because you need to touch on the story, but you also can't expose it as much as you can in other types of stories, because of paradoxes and weird things like that.
I guess that makes sense. I always like the weird conventions of worlds. Like that's always the fun part to me, is like, how did you build this society, and why did you build this society the way you built this society?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it practical? Because it doesn't have to be. That's like, I think that's a thing that is often overlooked in world building, is it doesn't have to make it has to make sense in terms of like to the world, but it doesn't have to be like the best option, because that we don't, like, real life doesn't choose the best option. So like, is putting security cameras everywhere the best option? I mean, sure, I guess in a police state it does sound like the best option, because you get to watch everybody and prevent time travel. But yeah, but like, that sounds also very expensive. And who's sitting here watching all of these stupid fucking cameras? And like, well, I don't know. It's
that one slogan, a humble life is better. Let me see if I can find it. A humble life is better than oblivion. That one slogan is sort of a hint at that sort of, and also an allusion to real life people who side with fascistic regimes. is that, you know, the sort of brainwashing that happens to a lot of people, especially the sort of rooted in divisions of society. I drew inspiration from that, and I think, like, if I had to write more about this, I definitely would just flesh that out even more, because there's a, you know, in my story anyway, there's that division is felt. It's the whole thing about right at the end where the main character says, "I live surrounded by motherfucking trash that would rather shoot these people dead than help them out." That's, you know, that's where that surveillance comes from, and that's in real life. That's also why that surveillance even is capable of surviving, is because there's a lot of people just betraying each other.
Good old.
I was on the hunt. It's hard to parse community on the first attempt, but I was definitely like, am I sensing queer coding in here? And I was like, so you have this particular group of people. I mean, you start off with fucking basically like a pair of like bigot dads having the most irritating conversation ever, and I'm like, okay, now here's this other group of people that are specifically hunted, but they're actually just doing this stuff to survive, and so on and so forth. Though you primed it for me by being like, I changed a word to handsome. What does that mean? And I'm like, it's a character trans. Is that what's happening? Like, is that the implication?
I think the characterization of the two characters that are discussing at the beginning might be a little bit lacking. So they're supposed to be father and child, I wasn't thinking specifically of queer coding in that aspect, but the main character is a woman, and so the I is a woman. And that's why I use the word that I told you that I that line where I say I wanted to look nice. I changed it to I wanted to look handsome, which is it's barely anything, but at least that's the line I changed. So there's a lesbian romance because Brianna is also a woman, and but I didn't think of queer coding in that regard in terms of the shifters being the LGBT community in that sense. I was thinking like immediately rather when I wrote this, when I thought up the premise, I was just thinking of normal class divisions. But the more I started thinking about what to say, not so much about what these people would be, but about what to say, I started just seeing more and more parallels to racialized oppression, basically racialized oppression with so
because there's a disproportionate correlation between class divisions and race and gender and sexuality and so on.
Mm-hmm. And I drew a little bit on my own sort of sense of my own understanding. I think I don't know if I went a little bit overboard, but I drew a little bit of my own I drew on a little bit of my own take on my relationship with that trauma and with that oppression. The whole thing about I don't like this is new to me. This grief is new to me, and like Brianna not being or being seemingly affected, or seemingly unaffected and stoic and cold in the face of her brother being gone, but the main character crying immediately. Like I wanted that to be real, or as real as I could get, but at the same time uncomfortable, and because I like that I like that duality. It's interesting to me. But if I had to write this into a book or something like that, I definitely would have to have co-writers, because this is the sort of subject that's first off is super heavy, and also it's not my kind of story to tell. This is very complicated to write about.
Whenever I try to write something, I definitely get hit by the shock of like, how does anyone fill a book?
I mean, it's more of just like, it's kind of like the amazement of someone just watching someone have a conversation for 6 hours, and you're like, how are you still talking? Are you okay?
We do half of that every week.
Yeah, but like that's the thing. But like imagine, but people, but like there's multiple people. Like someone doing it to them by themselves is like, what the fuck? That's
just talking to themselves crazy. For 6 hours.
Yeah, I mean that's what writing a book is. You're right. You're telling yourself a story basically.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm just astonished. Like I find that I can get so much done relatively quickly that I'm like, I don't understand how you like fill out a book. Like, how do you even come up with a story that will fill like 200 pages, for example? Because like I can and like I don't know, it makes me wonder like what would happen if I tried to write a story I already know from a book, and like how long my version would end up being. It's like, oh, that's 20 pages. Here you go.
I think it has to like the whole pacing, because that has to do with pacing more than anything, and it depends on the stories. Because some stories are very simple and others have a lot of detail. But like for example, when I was writing this, I reached the ending. Like I was writing just pure pacing, and I reached the ending in 1,200 words, and I ended up with 2,000, a little bit over 2,000. And the reason why I ended up with that difference, almost double, is because I went back and I was like, okay, this bit over here needs to have a big pause. And it's the big pause that in a movie, you can just, have a long panning camera or just somebody's emotion. And that pacing in a movie works really well because people can just not talk for like a whole minute or more. And it allows the viewer to dwell on what's going on and absorb the new information and absorb the information that just happened. In a book, you need to keep going. So that's how I do it. I don't know if it works very well every time, and I don't know if I'm doing it properly either, because I'm sure there's a bunch of techniques and stuff. But how I do it is like for example, when when I wanted to add a moment where they were crying for a little bit, I made a huge diatribe. Well, not a huge, but I made a big diatribe about how it wasn't right, and like it's just the internal feelings of the main character. And if this was a full book or written for a full book, I would write pages and pages probably, and just with exposition and details, because you can do that. You can just have 2 pages of a parentheses in a way, just to add that pause. I think that's why books are just so big, is because they do that pacing like that.
You take these tangents where you take a step forward in the story, and then you go back and you start explaining something that you're kind of like peppering through, so that you don't just sit there and like exposition dump something for like 3 pages straight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Pacing is a weird thought in general. Like,
yeah, I mean
I think that it's weird to think about, but like the Witcher books are like reasonably meaty. They're not quick, tiny, short books, but they're also not like fucking Game of Thrones tomes or anything. And I think they're like 300 pages each or something, and like not so little happens in them, and yet they feel like the best paced fantasy books I've ever read. Like they're real page turners, and in the moment it always feels like all this stuff's happening, and then when I look back on that, I'm like, I'm actually shocked how little happened in this book if I try to summarize it.
He just went into the room and look at the flowers, and it's 5 pages later.
Yeah. Like the opening section, I think I've mentioned it before, but like there's the opening section where Dandelion does a performance about the events of the 2 short stories books, and then everyone in the audience is arguing about whether or not his stories are true or not, and because they're real people in the real world, they're also like debating them based on actual experiences that they've had and so on. And so it's kind of a death of the author thing going on, and this metatextual questioning and so on. But then he gets captured and interrogated by someone that has a much more significant interest in a detail of one of his stories. He gets saved by Yennefer, and then he and Yennefer have a meal together while she also asks some questions. That's 50 pages of a 300-page book, if I remember correctly. And it's like,
that's it. Yeah, it's like a huge chunk.
It's kind of like only 2 scenes, basically, or something. And it's like, and I burned through it. It was great. And I had a great time reading it. It's all dialogue driven and stuff, and it's fun. And I'm like, but I'm so confused by the disparity when I realize how many pages it's taking to do that. Like what's kind of fascinating is the fact that like the entirety of the first book of the Witcher saga is essentially Geralt trying to figure out how to raise Ciri, being confronted over the fact that he's doing a terrible job at it, taking her somewhere else to care for her, and then that's kind of it. It's kind of where things like drop off. Like that's basically the core event that happens over the course of the entire first book. There are scenes and details otherwise in other entire chapters that aren't the thing I just said, but it's like when you try to think back about that, like from point A to point B of like what happened over the course of that thing, I was like, I was unsurprised to hear that season 2 of The Witcher apparently doesn't follow the books like very much at all, because I'm like, genuinely, what would that season of television be? Like, what is each episode? Like 10 episodes of like that for 10 hours of that? I'm like, where do you, like, the book is great. I have no complaints about the book, but I have no idea how you would make like an episodic show out of that content. And like it gets all these weird questions about what is pacing and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the translation to another medium is kind of one of the biggest hurdles. And
I think it would work if they made it like a Monster of the Week kind of show, which
like a Super Sentai show. Like it's just like Geralt just shows up. He's just walking down the forest, and it's like help. It's like dun 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 dun, and he just like runs out of the forest or something. And it's just
like X-Files is, for example, or like Supernatural is. There's a bunch of that sort of genre, but The Last Wish, which is the only book I read, The Last Wish is kind of half of it is like the Monster of the Week, because it's if I remember correctly, it's wait, is it Dandelion telling stories, or how exactly does that fit in? Because you don't know at the beginning of the book, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I read it, but at the beginning of the book of Last Wish, you're reading Geralt doing things, and it's like, look at Geralt doing things. Now there's this thing, and now there's that thing, and it's enjoyable. And it's like you read a chapter every day or whatever, and I think it is written to be read like that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. It seems to be taken literally, and then the third book opens with what feels like an implication that it's possible that the events you remember might have been Dandelion's versions of the story. Mm-hmm. Which isn't like that's not set in stone or anything. It's just like it's just the fact that the next book opens with him telling the story in all the details makes it feel like it could have been embellished for all you know. It's just the fact that it makes you question it all, because in the act of having the characters question Dandelion, you end up yourself questioning the author and what's going on with the narrative. Mm-hmm. But no, the original books were Monster of the Week, and that's why the season 1 of the show more or less was. Yeah. But of course, the core conceit of The Witcher is that the monsters are never the monsters.
I always felt, absolutely.
Like the show just opens up with him just slaying something in like a couple seconds, and then it's like a cold open, and then moves on to like plot actually happening, and that really summarizes how stupid it would be to make a show that was actually just about fighting monsters, because there's just nothing there. It's all about finding out like how he's being lied to, or what the monster actually wants, or what actually created it, and so on and so forth, as opposed to just like fighting a thing and then it's dead and it's like, wow, I did it, 5-minute fight scene story.
I do appreciate that every it's like Berserk level, or every single it's like, well, why does this thing exist? And it's always just like, it was definitely not my fault. And it's like, okay, so it was definitely your fault. Like like every single character seems to always just be like, man, that thing's bad, good thing it wasn't me. And then it's Geralt just going, I think you did that.
Well, yeah, sometimes it is in the smaller stories it's like that a lot, but not in the big ones. Or in the bigger ones. I only read The Last Wish, so I don't have a firm grasp over the overall plot. But I get, correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, I get the impression that the way the bigger political storylines are told are just very, very different from the way the smaller local storylines are told. Do you know what I mean by that? Like even the nature of the plots, rather than just the way they're told, like they tell a different story. I always got the impression anyway that it's what I was going to say before. Dandelion, I feel like it's an author insert. And all the things, like you can doubt Dandelion's
it could be
authenticity of his story, but it at the same time doesn't matter as much, even within the context of the books and of the games. It doesn't matter as much because it's like doubting the authenticity of the author of the books, because obviously Geralt doesn't exist. It is not real, but it doesn't matter. It's a story. And I think that's why it works a little bit better than normal author inserts, or at least that's what I expect normal author inserts are. Dandelion, I mean, being the author insert. But the thing is, when Dandelion himself talks very differently about the bigger political plot lines than he does about the smaller scale. There's a griffin that showed up, or the stroll doesn't like this village or whatever. And then whenever it's about kings, it's like all these kings, they're all corrupt or whatever. It's like the moral of the story changes. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't change, I suppose, because if you're saying that kings are corrupt, it's still the real monsters are people. It's just that kings are talked about in a very different way from normal people in that book. In the setting, I should say. Even to the point where they, I read the chapter where Geralt gets killed, and the last book before the games. Well, if you played The Witcher 1, you know that. I read that chapter, and I got it's been a long time, but I get the impression that the author specifically sort of doesn't. It's not necessarily about dehumanizing the individual person that kills Geralt, but it's like he's the mascot of the whole village rather than the one person that went and killed Geralt. And it's written to be like that. It's written that Geralt was killed by the people who was trying to protect, not protect, but still. Often he would try to protect, not in that particular case, because it's the whole thing about the Butcher of Blaviken and things like that.
Yeah, it's more or less how things start.
Mm-hmm. And so, Geralt. Yeah, I don't know.
A lot of the best stories don't even really have an answer, basically. In that even the what's essentially fan works are usually pretty good at understanding that too. Like I think the Witcher graphic novels might be made by the people that wrote the games or something. Like they're not from the original author. They definitely always have an ad for the video game in them. And like Volume 5, Fading Memories, was like this beautiful train wreck of a chapter where just every single element of the story, everyone was wrong about everything all the time, from the protagonist to the people in power to the people that he encountered along the way. And like he encounters, like they're leading into the usual thing about how Geralt is the last Witcher in a world that doesn't need him anymore, and he encounters another character that doesn't have any place anymore. Mm-hmm. But he abandons them to pursue a problem that, like, where the person that is in power is actively just sort of like tugging him around on what the actual problem is and how to actually fix it, and they're essentially just treating symptoms on purpose. But then when he finds out what's actually happening, it just becomes this mess of like, what the fuck is even morally right here? Like, what would you even do about this problem? Like, I guess you could just go fuck yourself, basically. And then it just ends, and you're like, well, that was a nightmare for everybody.
That's an interesting... It ends... How does it end, though? Like, does it not
I don't remember
finish?
Exactly how. Somebody else is borrowing my comics for The Witcher.
Take it on good authority that it ends.
It does run out of pages at some point, shockingly. You'll never guess what happens next. The credits.
Oh no.
Yeah, I like that sort of attitude towards storytelling. There was
ending the story.
No,
the
not
escape
ending
from moralizing,
the story,
but instead just exploring how everyone's individually fucked.
Well, The Witcher is very nihilistic in that regard, and just everybody is inevitably always bad, even though it does itself have a moral compass. The books, they have a moral compass.
It's not always so much bad as just having problems that don't have answers.
Yeah. No, like, I do think that it does portray everybody to be like, you can't like everybody or anybody unconditionally, not even Geralt, in the books, which is not the reality.
That's just realistic in some ways. Like it's not. It's just the fact that people have complications which doesn't make them like evil or anything, but like,
well, they do, but only
everyone's
when
kind of a mess.
only when you really delve deep into people, not like the time it takes for a book of The Witcher to get to the rotten bits of people is just fast. It's just, look at this person. They help the children, but they also killed their mother. So, oh, look at this little girl. She's nice and likes cats, but she's also a demon and bad.
I'm just thinking about the complications of like, I'm sorry, I just don't remember the names of any of the Witcher books. Except the first short story one, I think, is called The Last Wish.
Yeah, that's
books in order.
Red cover.
What is the fucking? I think it's okay. It's The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny are the short stories. Blood of Elves is the first serialized one. Like I just think about the fact that like there's like a 50-page chunk of that book that's just them in a caravan with Yarp and Zikrin and arguing about politics, basically.
Oh, that's the dwarf, right?
And it's fucking great. It's enthralling. It's just a mess. It's like talking about how the Scoia'tael, because the first thing you think of for the Scoia'tael is elves usually, but it's full of dwarves, and it's because it's about the allied races dealing with the tyranny of humanity and so on in that setting. And obviously Zigrin is on a human caravan here with Geralt, and it's like this mess of like whether or not the people, like whether or not he's a traitor to his own people, or whether or not they themselves are sort of being sold a lie to begin with and just being hyped up because they're young and easy to rile up for something and so on. And it's just like this mess. And like every element of The Witcher, it's always told from the perspective of a character that has their own biases and perspectives. So you're getting a filtered version. So you have which I always think like that way of telling a story makes things more engaging, because you kind of feel like you have to hunt for the real answers while you're going through it. Like you have to question every character that you're dealing with.
And it also allows you to disagree with a character without being like, these books are shit. Because, if you... like The Witcher 2, for example, has a terrible eye for understanding system. What's the word? Systemic. That's the word. Witcher 2 has a terrible eye for understanding systemic oppression of the dwarves and the elves, and it pays lip service to similar things in real life, but it does it out of just, this is what happens. Let's portray the elves and the dwarves as being oppressed races, which they are, obviously, but it, at the same time, as things like ghettos and basically apartheid states and different laws for either if you're a dwarf or an elf, and there's nobody ever complain. Not even the elves and the dwarves complain about that in The Witcher 2. It's always so surface level, and anytime they're like, there's one time early in the game where you confront the boss of this one town that you go to. And you say, "Oh, you treat the elves and the dwarves bad," and he says, "Oh, I do, but that's because they're criminals. The nice ones, they don't get treated bad." But the reality is that they live in an apartheid town. The dwarves and the elves that live either outside of town or in like a little ghetto thing. So even what he's saying right there and it's not challenged by Geralt. The conversation is with Geralt. Even what he's saying there is not correct in like the game passes it as correct. Like he treats the good ones good, which the game doesn't say is the good thing to do, to be racist, but only for the bad ones. The game doesn't say that, but it doesn't have a good eye for system.
I think the real Geralt's smarter than that.
Yeah, but the Witcher 2 has it's complicated, but the thing is that's I think the hardest things to do from when you're telling a story like this is understanding the implications of the setting you're telling the story of. And I think that happens with a lot of franchises, not just The Witcher. Like it happens with Mass Effect as well. I was just let's not derail the conversation, but still the it's very easy to fall into those traps, because the moment you introduce one subject, you need to ask yourself, why is that subject there? So if you have like an apartheid town, you need to ask, why is that like that? Why don't humans live with dwarves? What is going on? And obviously the reason is because they are systemically indoctrinated to not like dwarves or elves or whatever. And then you ask, why is that? And the reason is because there's all racist. basically. If
I
there's
thought it
one
was
thing that
because
The
it was
Witcher...
really annoying to have like all of your stuff really low on the shelves.
No, it's if there's one thing that The Witcher does is all human, and that's why I think that it might be a little bit nihilistic. Humans are consistently portrayed as just bigoted in the most absurd way possible. That doesn't allow, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the story it tells, but it doesn't allow anybody to be like, oh yeah, they're bigoted, but it's because of the system they grow in. No, they're just bigoted because that's it goes in their soul. They don't like the dwarves.
I mean, doesn't it take place in kind of a Middle Ages-esque time period?
Yeah, but the Middle Ages
seems pretty accurate. Then
no, though it's that I think that is you raise a good point. But the Middle Ages weren't necessarily a bigoted place or a bigoted time.
I mean, these people thought that witches were real. I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt here.
But not in regard. That's, I mean, yeah, but they're not certainly not. It's complicated to say what I'm saying here, but in terms of race, the construct of race is a very modern thing, and it didn't exist in the Middle Ages, at least in the way it exists today. When it comes to being bigoted against a race, that's very much a modern thing. Like that's after the 700s and the 1800s. It didn't exist.
I think people were kind of concerned with just living.
Well, and also the thing is, not there's no excuse for bigotry, but there are sometimes reasons why it is more generalized. And in the modern day, and when I say modern day, not the current day, but also the current day, in the last 200 years, the reason why bigotry is so generalized is because it's enticed by the people in power. And that's why I'm saying The Witcher has no understanding and it does not explain how the bigotry of its world is ever enticed by the people in power of its world. So it's just treated as if it's a thing people are. People don't like other races because they don't like other races. And that's in itself a bigoted view. That's not how it works. The people don't hate even the definition of race, which obviously in The Witcher it exists, because they have different lifespans and they have thousands of years of history that's different and all that sort of stuff. So the distinction is the whole thing about, the race analogy, but it's with biologically different species and the shortcomings that brings. But even the people saying you are of a different race than this person, or you're of the same race as this person that's all socially constructed. And it is rooted in basically societal norms that are reinforced by the people in power. I don't know. It's a very complicated subject, and like every one of the things that I just said, there's so many like takeaways that we could discuss, and I'm not necessarily very well equipped. I'm just saying I'm bad mouthing The Witcher here, not trying to
going after it. Do you mean are you talking about specifically the games or all of The Witcher?
Specifically the games, specifically The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 1 as well, but The Witcher 2 is more than The Witcher 1. I didn't watch the series and I only read one book, so my criticism for the rest is can't be taken with that into consideration.
I was gonna say, like, I think I don't have it all memorized or anything, and I'm also not done, but like with the series. But Blood of Elves already, I'm like, there's some texture going on here that isn't just simply like people are racist for fun.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Like,
that's very important.
I think I remember acknowledging that people benefit from the racism, and that's basically the point.
Yeah, that's a good way of. That's a good way of. I think it's a good way of at least contextualizing it.
Oh yeah, and
what do you even get? Is it like
I didn't know exactly what you meant when you talked about Dandelion talking differently about the short stories or long stories or whatever, but there is a distinction that I did notice between those books, which is just the fact, like I had a tweet about it, and then I was like, can I get a script out of this? And I kind of think I can't, but it was incentive enough to finish reading Blood of Elves at least. What stuck out to me so much was the fact that Geralt is defined by not his apathy, but his claim to apathy. Like, it's such a big part of his character that he needs to explain that he's like unattached and unemotional and so on, and he blames it, and he claims that that's like what Witchers are, and it's obviously false. Like every minute of every piece of fiction of all of The Witcher, like
Yeah.
they obviously have emotions and attachments and so on, but like that's a beneficial character trait to cling to when you're trying to be this character that is unattached and is going to have these like standalone adventures where each one's like 50 pages and then it just cuts to a completely different story happening in a different year or whatever, which is the first two entire books. And like one, his like supposed neutrality and everything is constantly brought into question and attacked, because like obviously like you have stories like The Butcher of Blaviken where that's the whole point, is the idea that you can't, there like his the very idea of neutrality is a false premise basically, that at worst just directly benefits whoever's in power and is still the same effectively as picking a side. Centrists are bad. But then you have the fact that he over the course of the series he keeps being less episodic, obviously. Like he picks up Dandelion and Yennefer and Ciri, and he has this like growing series of reoccurring characters here and there until they go from being reoccurring characters in episodic adventure to just being a serialized adventure. It's like you have 2 standalone story books, and then you have like 5 or 6 consecutive books that are just one continuous story. And it's and the big deciding moment, if I remember correctly, is when he get like not when Ciri is introduced or when the backstory of Ciri is happening, but specifically when Geralt and Ciri like become a like this like adopted father and daughter. And so suddenly the moment he has family, suddenly the story's format just changes entirely from being an episodic story to being a serialized one. And that's like a massive change. Like that's like, I can't even really think of stories that have worked that way before. Like that's really specifically weird to literally start off as being like, and here's this story, and here's this story, and like each one's a little titled story, and like and then like this is chapter 3 of this story that you're in or whatever, and then each book has like 8 stories or something, to just being like, no, here's one story for 5 books.
Yeah, that's the threat of having children. They just change your entire life.
He finally got entangled enough in enough other people's lives that he couldn't pretend to just be this uncaring wanderer. And that's pretty cool. And Geralt's a pretty cool character, and I like his characterization. And he just can't admit he cares this much, but he does.
Yeah.
Very
that's
relatable.
More or less.
The entire like second 50 pages of Blood of Elves are pretty much just entirely Triss coming after Geralt for fucking up at raising Ciri.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Sorry, what? I'm sorry.
Is anybody helping him?
Yeah, there's like 3 other Witchers there. They're in Kaer Morhen, and it's like the abandoned Witcher like HQ, but they're all men.
Saying, are there other people?
Well, his way of taking care of Ciri was to take Ciri all the way off to the fortress that the Witchers used to be created and trained in, and just like hang out there with 4 adult men and just like train, I guess. And like that's like her being raised and all that. And it's like there are like some biological things going on with women as they come of age that you might want to think about, dude.
He can ask the 100-year-old wizard that he's dating. It's fine. I'm sure she knows.
There's like all these hidden things. There's like all these difficulties that Ciri's going through that she's hiding from them and so on, that just are immediately apparent to Triss the moment she's there, because she would know to even think about it.
Yeah, but that's I don't know. That's what I'm saying is like he's doing this all on his own. Like he's I don't know. I feel like he's trying his best. Poor guy. It's like shit.
You're saying that the training of Ciri is a whole book, or I didn't catch the beginning of the conversation.
No, he's saying it was a found family.
We keep having clarifications where I'm like, I don't know what I'm clarifying. What?
No, because you were talking about Geralt wanting to bring Ciri to Kaer Morhen and raising her there, which is
the Blood of Elves starts with the Dandelion chapter, and then it cuts to Ciri and Geralt and Triss being in Kaer Morhen.
Oh,
which is where they ended up after they ended up together. I haven't read
Gross.
Sword of Destiny for like 3 years.
It's better than the last time I read The Witcher, which is 12 years.
I don't remember if it's like the show, where in the show they just fucking see each other in the forest and then the credits roll and they're like, come back in 2 years when the next season happens or whatever.
That's
the
one
show
way of
was a
dealing with it.
nightmare in a lot of ways.
It really is,
oh
yeah.
Oh my god. It really... I haven't watched season 2, but season 1 was a fucking mess. I mean, I made a whole video about it already, but like... They split every episode between all 3 characters, even though like Ciri has almost no role in Geralt's story until they actually meet. And it leads to really confusing stuff going on, because all like on some level I thought it was vaguely cool that the 3 characters' scenes were happening on 3 different timescales. Like essentially Yennefer's perspective in The Witcher season 1 essentially takes place over the course of like 100 years. And Geralt's probably takes place over the course of like a decade, and Ciri's might take place over the course of like a week. But they're happening at the same time from episode 1 through episode 10 until they kind of all converge and suddenly are in parallel all of a sudden. But the Ciri stuff is spread so thin relatively, and the Geralt stories are so crunched to make room for 2 other stories taking up airtime that like there's several stories that get adapted where I'm like, what was even the point of trying to adapt this? Like I was looking forward to him like confronting the satyr and having the ongoing shenanigans of him and Dandelion trying to interact with the villagers and pick up intel and continually making the situation worse and worse and failing continuously to deal with this guy. And instead the entire interaction with the satyr is like 10 seconds long. That's it.
Isn't it like at the beginning of the episode or something?
It's immediately over. Like he throws a rock. He throws one of his metal orbs, which he didn't have. They gave them those. That was their mistake. Like it's their fault. He had metal orbs in the book. He throws them at Dandelion and knocks him out, and then Geralt just tackles him, and he's like, stop, I'm an intelligent creature. It's like the last second, like, see, that's like the thing you yell at a Witcher to make them not kill you, because now there's a moral problem. And then Geralt gets captured, and it becomes what the real plot is, which is the to go on about the politics of the elves and introduce them as a faction. But they literally skipped the entire storyline that's like half of the story, which is just dealing with this fucking satyr. They're just like, no, we'll skip it.
I think you mentioned something about the whole thing about intelligent creature or whatever in your video. I don't remember because I watched it when it came out and it's been a while. But
yeah, and it was unscripted nonsense. That's
not correct though, right? Geralt kills intelligent people. I meant intelligent creatures, but including
after he's made a moral decision about it.
Yeah,
Geralt usually kills people in self-defense.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas intelligent creatures, there's like a hunting thing going on. I mean, he almost always sides against killing the creature in most contexts, basically, unless it's like a griffin. Or a zombie or a necker or the drowners and stuff like that.
Bias on the birds.
Mm-hmm. All the undead things can definitely go fuck themselves, generally speaking.
Yeah, in general, not just in
but like he has vampire friends.
It's true.
He's a vampire friend is like a main character of Blood and Wine.
Vampires aren't really, they're not really undead.
They're undead.
Are vampires real people?
But they're intelligent. But also, like, obviously, like, vampires are intelligent. They're wildly intelligent, and they can be incredibly evil. And so, like, there's a choice to be made there. But generally speaking, Geralt isn't going to kill something that's intelligent unless he needs to. And the satyr was just a pain in the ass. Just a massive pain in the ass. But
I like to think about that.
Murdering people.
I like to think that it's like a passed down tradition that all monsters know, is that if you meet a Witcher, you can be as rude as you want, but as soon as the swords come out, remind them that you're you're an intelligent creature.
I mean, the way that he shouts it out, it definitely sounds like it's a prepared defense.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like,
it's
yeah, he like
Geralt
shouts
is
it
like
straight
that,
up
though.
like I'm not resisting or something like that.
Yeah, that's like it sounds exactly like that. That's why I
But
was like,
the other Witchers are that tend to be unscrupulous in that, or at least portrayed as that. They will just kill
Well,
anything and anyone.
uh,
There's a bunch of Witchers that just kill people. At least in the
Sure,
book.
I
Yeah,
don't, I
I
don't
mean,
know how
there
much there's
are-
necessarily a Witcher code for that.
yeah, I would imagine it's like a personal code, but I think Geralt's also or Geralt's also well known enough that like I imagine people know which one he is. He's
Like
the
I think his first
sexy
encounter
white
more
hair.
or less summarizes the whole thing. I think the first story of the Last Wish is the Striga.
Is that the first? I thought it was that dude in the mansion.
I think the
It might
Butcher
be
of
the
Blaviken
Striga.
was the first episode of the show, but I think the book opens with the Striga, and that more or less summarizes the entire character's stance on monsters, more or less, because he's hired to do a basic job. It's going to be hard. Apparently, multiple Witchers have already either died or fled when faced with the task. And it's just like this horrible monster in this castle, essentially, and it sometimes comes out and feeds on people at night. And so he's just tasked to kill it, and that's it. But instead, he cures it because he's able to uncover that it was actually this there's this massive conspiracy, essentially, because it was like a cursed royal that has been stuck there for all that time, and he ends up in the process, he's uncovering everything that the people who hired him specifically don't want people to know about, and he's kind of directly running against his thing to the point where his morality will often win out over the very idea of even getting paid at the end of the day, because he often pisses off the people that hired him by doing what's right instead of just killing the thing that they went after.
Mm-hmm. I think in the first game, if you didn't read the books, it doesn't come across as that. But if you read the books, you realize, I think, that basically it's the same thing with the Striga. It's the same exact storyline, but the person who hires you, I think, is different, and the ones that are in the conspiracy, they know that Geralt lost his memory, so they're playing him for a fool. I think that's how it works in the first game, but it doesn't come across as that if you didn't read the books. You just always just this story that it's the Striga story. It's exactly the same beats, except the princess is hot now because she's an adult. Because she's a kid, I think, in the books, and in the game she's like 20 or something. The Witcher 1 has a very straightforward attitude toward women. It's they are
that's the one with the deck, right?
That's the one with the deck, yeah.
They have a deck of naked women in that one, right?
It's very straightforward.
Semi-naked
They're
a lot of
hot.
the time.
Like,
But, well, I was specifically in regards to the clothing and to the bosom. It's very simple. The first time that you see that princess, she's wearing a negligee, and she's big bosomed as she often is. Often? Wait, that's not how bosoms work.
I mean, I think that depends. It's a very bosom by bosom basis.
Bosom by bosom. Oh, sorry.
But
Still fighting a little cough.
yeah,
a
I
little bit
was
of a
gonna say
cough.
fantasy tends to be pretty consistent about that point of view, though. I feel like.
Oh, yeah, I just found an outline of the book. The opening story is called The Witcher, and that's the Striga. The story The Lesser Evil, which is the Butcher of Blaviken, is actually the third story.
Yeah, because it's a big story as well, isn't it?
I don't remember how much the sizes vary.
I remember. Well,
Dude, this
yeah,
guy.
it's been a while.
What the fuck?
It's been a long while. It's getting up on the threshold of my forgetting memory. When it's a few more years and I don't remember it at all. It's been 12 years since I read it.
So I think the second one was I think the second story is like a mansion that has like basically a
one,
werewolf or something in it. And then the third
That
one
sounds
is
interesting.
it's the
That's
evil
the
wizard
coolest
that
story.
ruined my life, but he's up in a tower, and I'm gonna start killing everyone in this town until he comes out.
Yeah. That's more or less how I remember it. That's
Welcome
the
to our
coolest
Witcher
story. That's the one that I
podcast.
like the most. Because they have conversations, and it's like he goes up to the mansion and like all the things, and the descriptions are very cool about how the mansion looks and all that. So he puts you into place. I like this sort of stuff.
Trying to think what
they're all really memorable stories.
Unless you have read them 12 years ago, and then I don't remember them as well.
Well, like After the Butcher of Blaviken is A Question of Price, and that one's that's the Law of Surprise story.
That's with the sorceresses?
No, that's the Law of Surprise. That's the it's the encounter that leads to it's like the one with the porcupine knight, and it leads to Ciri existing.
Mm-hmm.
Like wildly important. And then The Edge of the World is next with the satyr, which has the satyr and the elves. And then The Last Wish is the one where he gets bound to Yennefer. It's like those 6 stories, like they're very specifically like they're all like integral to the overall mythos. Or most of them are pretty integral to the mythos of like the overall franchise or whatever. But also like each of them's just a really solid like narrative on their own, and I can like remember them all. I think the least memorable one for me right now actually is the mansion guy.
Yeah, that probably doesn't tie in too much. It's only character building more than anything.
I can't help you.
Because the Striga one is also character building, but it's also related to the whole political situation that unfolds and keeps unfolding.
Once you look at it, it's really hard to unnotice how many of the monsters are essentially just naked women.
That was a primal fear back then.
The Striga is a naked woman,
and so on. Like there's just a bunch of women that attack you.
Oh yeah.
And then it gets a lot more noticeable when you read the comics because you actually have to see all the monsters. And I'm like, huh. Like I think I think all 4 of the first 4 volumes of the Witcher comics, the villain is some kind of monster woman.
I mean, that's pretty. What's it called? Greek mythology was similar to that too, right? Like Greek mythology always had a, like Greek monsters tended to always be women, like mermaids, harpies, fucking.
Well, there's a lot of
mermaid chapter.
Yeah, there's like just like for some reason it's easy.
I think the mermaid's like a slighted lover or something.
I guess also like Japanese yokai is also similar to that. Most Japanese ghosts are also women. I don't know. I think it's just like it's guys that are just scared. Like they're just really scared of women. There's like, oh, I don't know, man. They smile
That's
sometimes.
Their primary motivation in life.
It's scaring me. Like, I don't know. It's funny to think about. There's like a mythology is just a bunch of guys scared of women. Oh God,
we've solved it.
We did it. We did it, guys.
We did it.
Our entire society is founded upon fear of women.
Mm-hmm.
They're just too powerful. What are we gonna do?
Well, we're gonna tell bad stories about them and how they have snakes for heads.
Oh shit! Even lionesses run the pack. Shit! It's just alpha logic was all wrong. It was all there to deceive us. We just wanted to take that alpha power back.
Lions are they're so misportrayed in Disney movies.
Lions are cheated out of the only good thing about them, which is that they are dumb, lazy cats, which is an amazing character type.
All cats are dumb, lazy cats.
Exactly. That's why it's a missed opportunity. Why wouldn't you love to see a dumb, lazy cat that's like also the size of a car? That sounds amazing. That's the best kind of cat.
You put it next to a rhinoceros.
Do they eat rhinoceros?
No,
I guess what do lions not eat? Do lions not eat anything? Do they always eat everything? I'm pretty sure they eat everything
because they're also necrophages. They eat
what?
Rotten
what did
meat.
You just say to me?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that word meant something else.
No, that's the other one. I don't remember the name of that one. I'm
not
sure
that. I thought you were saying they're like necro wizards, like a type of
necro
wizard. I was like, what?
They're necromancers.
Not necromancers, but like something else, like some kind of like special version of a necromancer, like a specialized necromancer.
No, I'm pretty sure they are. I might be wrong about that,
but
I'm pretty sure. I might be wrong, but I read somewhere or I saw somewhere that because they have such a sparse chance or such few chances of hunting, again because they tend to only eat like once or twice a week, and they can go for like 2 weeks without eating anything. So they basically have a gut that is very acidic and destroys all the bad things that you get from eating rotten meat. That's how hyenas eat rotten meat and stuff like that. But they don't necessarily like eating rotten meat. It's just that, well, if that's it, that's it.
Lions are hella toxic, man.
Yeah, their guts at the very least. They have terrible acid reflux. It's terrible. That's why they're always grumpy.
I thought that's why they're always sleeping, trying to sleep off the acid.
The acid reflux. Well, that's just the normal cat stuff.
I see. I definitely feel like I could win against a cat in a fight than that. Like if it doesn't eat in 2 weeks, hell yeah.
Cats are unbeatable.
I'm just gonna eat a meal in front of it just to piss it off. I'll win.
Cats are the ultimate enemy.
Bit of spite.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, did you like that my story had dogs and your guys' story didn't have dogs? My story was the best one because it had dogs.
We did have a missed opportunity there. No pets.
Yeah, our quota failed.
Yeah, no pets were in our stories. I guess we were focused too much on the craft and not enough on the entertainment.
That sort of detail
to have plot twists.
That sort of detail comes to me just from thinking up like places that are similar that I've been in, and then focusing on the details specifically instead of like being, there's this hallway and then it leads into that one and stuff that I make up. No, I focus on things like the sofa and the fire and the dog, even though it doesn't necessarily talk about the main story. I like that sort of tapping into imagination because I don't know where it came from. I don't even have a dog.
I always get worried I'll get too distracted by it. I'll spend too much time on it.
So you spend the whole time writing about the dog.
Yeah. I'll just like spend the whole story about the dog rather than like the story. But yeah, I don't know.
Here's my 12-page manifesto about this dog going on adventures. What was the premise about again?
No, let's not make another short story about, well, anytime soon. Let's go with that. And certainly not 12 pages. Because mine was 3 pages and a half, I think, or 4 pages. I don't know. Pages are weird. They're not a count.
I think it was.
No, pages doesn't actually mean much.
Yeah, it's 2,000 words. I counted your words, Keith. You went over. Andrew was 2,000 exactly.
Was he really exactly 2,000?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I made sure it was 2,000 exactly.
Why?
I felt guilty.
I wasn't going to do more work than I needed to do.
What? That's definitely more work. How do you you don't accidentally land on exactly 2,000?
I was curious if anybody would notice.
I noticed.
Thank you.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Mine went a little bit over.
It was almost 2,200.
Mm-hmm.
Too many words.
Whatever it takes to finish the story.
I noticed some similarities between my story and yours, Keith, because it was it's the nature. Maybe it's just a cliche in short stories. It's one character going from one place to another, and that's it.
What?
And then there was a sun.
There was a sun.
They walked and there was a sun. The end. And someone cried.
Very confused.
Mm-hmm.
I've solved storytelling.
Thank God someone's on the case. Can't keep
what
getting away with it.
To point out.
I mean, I saw maybe other similarity. I like. I didn't. So my initial problem with I think I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but my initial problem with writing my story was the exposition that is required to lay out such a fantastical world, such as a world where everybody can time travel, and how that works without creating too many questions in the reader. So the me coming up with the idea that maybe 2 people can be arguing about it, and the main character can be the narrator about the argument, and that, I think that worked relatively well. It was a little bit kind of similar to how you did it in regards to at least having the the other characters talk to in regards to the exposition, but you just went. That was the whole point about your story was that it wasn't. I just did it at the beginning.
I think dialogue is often one of the best ways to convey anything about a world or a story or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because you have to there's because it by default doesn't you can't just sit there and explain everything via dialogue unless you're a hack. You can't just sit there and be like, here's my 7 paragraphs of a guy monologuing like this is a video game or something. So it becomes if you're doing dialogue well, it's it's so much more entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
The actual dialogue is, but also you get the information in this sort of piecemeal, natural feeling kind of way that honestly makes it more memorable and more effective to even be something you remember compared to
Mm-hmm.
that the nightmare that is modern video game writing. Just the crisis that is being faced by video game writing, where even Horizon Zero Dawn is not head and shoulders above Kingdoms of Amalur necessarily when it comes to exposition, where it's so much of the actual moment, so much of the storytelling is you just kind of walk up to a person and they just fucking monologue for some reason at you for 10 minutes, and you briefly prompt them a little bit along the way, but you don't feel like an interacting character the way that Harry Dubois does.
Mm-hmm. And even Harry in Disco Elysium doesn't necessarily prod all that much, but I think it's the biggest advantage of having dialogue-driven exposition is that you're also creating a character at the same time. So that's just, it's useful writing. It's not just in this world these people think this. Because for one, then you need to take the narrator at face value, and you need to either trust the narrator or not trust the narrator. And sometimes, especially in more complicated settings, maybe not even in more complicated settings, even in simple settings where the narrator says, in this kingdom, the king was good. And my anarchist ass is immediately like, no, he wasn't. Eat him. Literally eat him right now. And so if a character says
that, if he was a king, checkmate.
Yeah, right. So if you have a character say, "Oh, in our kingdom the king is good," I can see that as character, as both characterization, but also it characterizes the setting where perhaps a lot of people like the king, which is an important thing. Because the king can be good at
everyone's a liar.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's useful and it works in such a way that it adds depth to everything rather than just being the narrator say stuff. That's but I'm saying that because I've been as I've mentioned before, I've been playing Mass Effect 2, and that codex it irks me. It irks me something fierce. Some of the claims that are made in the codex of that game is just no, that's not. But then again, the codex is written by the Alliance. Yeah, the codex, you need to go into the menu and just read it or have it read at you. There's some spoken
it read at me. It just yells, "Let me tell you the story."
There's audio files and there's text files. The audio files also have text, but I think it is written from the Alliance perspective, so you can sort of justify some of its claims as Alliance propaganda, but not all of them.
I mean, I was going to say most of your interactions in Mass Effect are Alliance propaganda.
In the first one, for sure, yeah, but not later. I think, not the second one. Yeah, the second one, I think the second one at least does that better than the first one, where you get more of a rich tapestry of people. And perspectives on the world. It's still capable of throwing bollocks at you for sure, but it's at least in regards to the diversity of opinions and people talking about things, it's better on that front. It's just not consistent about it, unfortunately. For example, the prison ship that is all manner of fucked up and revealing of all manner of misunderstandings that the writers have about reality. Not just the game, but in reality as well. The prison ship, I think. That's where Jack is.
God,
It
God,
is
how
so
long
badly
those games are.
explained. I think Mass Effect 2 is shorter than Mass Effect 1.
I just meant like as a franchise entirely, but I don't actually know if that's true or not.
Let me look
Mass
at
Effect.
Keith's Let's
All
Play.
the Mass Effect games are pretty short until you get to the bad one.
The
Damn.
bad one is big just to spite you.
It's like as long as the other ones all combined. Like, what a fucking disaster.
The Mass Effect
Is that how
1
it's
on
supposed to be?
Keith's playlist. Keith did like a cheaty Let's Play where he's like, I want to play Andromeda. And then he has 2-hour episodes.
Oh yeah, no, I was in a
remember.
hurry to get through the Mass Effect trilogy
Yeah, you
before
were.
Andromeda.
Gotta go
That
fast.
said, it does look
was
like Mass Effect 2 is bigger.
I don't think I even had a schedule back then. I just did whatever the fuck I wanted.
True freedom.
I watched the first one, but I didn't watch Mass Effect 2 or Mass Effect 3.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
I was scanning through it, trying to process the conversation between Yarpen and Geralt because I was curious because of the discussion just now about Exposition, and I was like, yeah, I don't think Andre, if that is how you spell, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, Andre Sapkowski.
Oh, the writer, right?
Andrzej.
The J's are E,
I don't think
always.
that's right.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say Andre Sapkowski. Not an easy name, even when I try to cheat at
Kick
it.
butt Lebowski.
Kick butt Lebowski.
Isn't it Polish names that get completely mangled in the US after World War II? There's a lot of people
I think
just called
all names get mangled in the US
I
that
have no
aren't
idea.
US names.
Yeah, like as far as I can tell, like
Jose?
from
No,
what
it's
I'm looking
Josie
at,
now.
like none of the world building happens outside of quotes.
That's good.
Like outside
That's
of
crazy.
quotes is like descriptions of people like moving and interacting or physically reacting to each other or so on. At most, there's sometimes like instead of writing a conversation, he summarizes the uninteresting part of the conversation essentially. Like he sometimes says he sometimes doesn't bother writing out dialogue, but instead was like, oh, she asked him about this and he didn't know or whatever. And instead of like actually writing her asking about it and him not knowing, but generally speaking, yeah, like all the there's this big like there's all these conversations about how the world works and what's going on and what the different conflicting motivations are and what everyone thinks about stuff, and it's all completely in character all the way through. And it's such a commitment, but it makes it all better and more memorable.
Yeah. Because it also allows you to do what games rarely do, which is give you conflicting reports of the same thing, which keeps you on edge.
Which
That's
like Disco Elysium thrives on.
Yeah.
And then something boring like fucking Kingdoms of Amalur, it's like, yeah, the entire game's exclusively exposition delivered by human beings, but none of that is by characters.
Oof.
So there's it's just 50 copies of the same exposition bot, but this one's a different voice actor with a different character model, a different name, but they all like have the same droning tone and they all just fucking exposit stuff at you with zero personality and almost no like bias or perspective to offer, but just like, it's my turn. Welcome to this Disney ride. I'm going to tell you how to not get your head chopped off when you ride this one. Like they're just, it feels like everyone's just reading from a script and it's just miserable.
That's
I
a
love
good
the
point.
idea that you just like a person just kind of shows up on your path and it's like, hey guys, Tom here. I'm going to tell you a story about exactly how the trail system works. Don't ask me why I know or why I'm here. Like, it's just like just a person just shows up out of nowhere and has to be there so you know.
It's a good point that you mentioned bias or perspective. So from what I saw of the Let's Play, the characters have personality, which just makes it even weirder. Because like this character is very goofy, or this character, I don't know, it speaks very weirdly or whatever. So they sort of imprint their own personality into the script that they're reading, but not their opinion. At least that's my impression about Kingdoms of Amalur.
I mean, voice actors don't have opinions.
No, I mean into the script.
So
Oh,
incredibly flat.
But it's the fate. Don't you know the fate? People, they're not free of the fate. The fate. Oh man, that was
I
badly
love the sound of
approached.
that. That sounds great.
Yeah, because basically in the setting, Keith might be able to correct me on this, but basically in the setting, there's this whole thing about people being stuck to their fates and not being able to choose, but they don't know what their fate is.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, and what? So they have these oracles that can tell the fate, but as far as I can tell, the oracles are the problem. Don't look at the fate, and there's no problem then.
Because then no one knows what path they're supposedly stuck on in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I to assume that the oracles said that everyone's bound by their fate? Who specifically started this rumor?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
That's another thing. How can you prove that people are bound to a fate? Yes, what will happen, but what does that mean?
This sounds very much like oracles trying to make a profit in a society that obviously doesn't need them for anything.
Honestly, it sounds like that old trope of video games where the RPGs, computer RPGs anyway, Ultima did this a bunch. It's tied to the storyline, but basically it's like, oh, in this world there's good and evil, but we can't tell what your character is because you can choose between good options and evil options. But in Kingdoms of Amalur, as far as I can tell, you don't really have a choice or an effect on the storyline. So like they made the whole storyline about, oh, we can't tell what your character is because you're outside of the fate. Guess what? You only have one ending. You're definitely inside the fate. But we tell it isn't.
That reminds me of like the ending of which Fable is it? Which one's the one where you go into the tower?
I don't know. Keith played Fable.
I just remember like I think I remember it had like a thing about like, whatever you decide in the tower will determine your fate or whatever. But like all of the options are basically like nobody likes you unless you save the dog. Like that's the only option. And so it's like, well, yeah, I really feel like I can't avoid I must live up to a particular legacy apparently, or else I don't think anybody's gonna respect me in this society. Like it
seems like a pretty simple moral code, honestly. Save the dog. The end.
Yeah. I mean, you should. If you don't, it's kind of fucked up, man.
Yeah, fair.
Like it's yeah. It's morally questionable if you should even be allowed to exist if you do not choose the dog.
The only thing I can even kind of remember about Fable is just the one really clever thing it did, where it's like, oh yeah, you want to overthrow me? Cool. Now you get to deal with the problem I was facing.
And I did, and I won. So obviously I was right. You're a bad king. Get out.
Well, that's one thing Mass Effect did better than Fable, then, because
it's just the thing that I couldn't stop thinking about. Because
no, it didn't. Because Mass Effect was like, "Oh yeah, you want to lead an army? Fine, go online and build an army." And I was like, "I don't think you." No, Anthem. That was Mass Effect 3, or just threw the controller at you and pissed in your face and acted like you were a child.
Like, he's talking about the fact that a progression mechanic was tied to online multiplayer.
Oh,
like a single player mechanic was.
Yes.
Wow, Electronic Arts is trash.
Yep, it was really fun multiplayer, but that shouldn't be part of that.
I guess that was like their way of buffing out the numbers, was that more people would play it if people were forced to play it. But obviously, just like anything, being forced to do something builds resentment more than it builds enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't stop thinking about the Fable thing because of the fact that throughout Kingdoms of Amalur, you become the leader of a faction and then you leave. Then you become the leader of a faction and then you leave.
Yeah,
I mean, it's literally one of the I think the lead writer of Kingdoms of Amalur was like a quest designer from Bethesda. Not a lead writer from Bethesda, but like a dude that would do grunt work essentially was like the lead writer of the entirety of Kingdoms of Amalur. And Yeah.
Oh, it shows. It shows very
Yeah.
Some
much.
confidence.
Yeah, no, it's straight up like the top. Like, there's definitely, I remember there's some Oblivion people working on it, but also specifically like I think the lead writer of the whole game was like, his previous credit was like quest events in Fable 3 or something, which is just not it's not like
Not the
it doesn't
biggest
have that much promise to
indictment.
it, that like pedigree,
Yeah.
that background. And so like, and yeah, it does have the same thing where it's like, here's a series of factions that are all like, let's say 8 quests long, like equally across all the factions, just like in Oblivion where it was like the length was basically identical each time. And it's like, here's the Mage Guild, and here's the Thieves Guild, and here's the guild where you just fight in the arena over and over again, and then you win at each one. And then it's like, and then when you're at the peak of supposed responsibility and involvement in the story of that place, you then leave forever and never come back because that's the end of the story. And it's like, hang on a minute. And so it's like, definitely like, all I could think about was Fable, because of the fact that it does at least have a game where you become the leader of a place and then you actually have to fucking deal with that afterwards, and the game doesn't just end there. It's like, now you're only halfway through now, fuck you. Because that's something, at least. It's so weird to have people being like, oh my god, you're the greatest hero ever and we love you and you're so important and you saved our faction from this eras long crisis and blah blah blah. And I'm like, who are you? I barely remember who you are. What are you? What's your personality like? Like, what is anything about you? And also, I'm leaving forever, so bye. Because there's nothing left to do. You just get another place to walk around in, and everyone's like, wow, it's you, we love you. But like, everyone talks that way in those games. There's they're hand job games. Every single person's obsessed with you in those games, which is itself.
That's why Morrowind is the best, because we're watching you, scum.
Bethesda has its own version of that problem, because like, not only sometimes it goes too much into like the real dialogue is like hero worshipping you in the way that Amalur does, but Bethesda games have those fucking greetings every time you walk near anyone. So everyone just shouts about how great you are constantly. And it's just agony half the time. It's that fucking, hey everyone, Henry's here to see us. But it's like, and it's always a nightmare, specifically because it's so unthoughtfully integrated that like, it's just characters just shout stuff when you walk within a radius of them, which is also what Kingdoms of Amalur does, and so on. And so like, it leads to moments like Fallout 4's Underground Railroad, where like 20 characters are densely packed into one little room and they all just shout at you constantly. And it's like, shut up, please. Like, if there was an ambient thing where it's like one guy in the background greeted me or whatever, then it'd be like, okay, whatever. But like, the fact that everyone shouts at you and has to like reflect your current reputation with them and whatnot is just like exhausting and irritating.
That is kind of real, though. If you live in like a small town and you're known by enough people, it is.
It isn't.
It seriously is. When I seriously, I do, or I don't know how often I guess you didn't hang out that much with us, Keith. I was thinking of like when you go places with CeeLo, like people will just like know who he is. I don't know who these people are. We would just like be in a place and someone would be like, "Hey, CeeLo, how's it going?" And he's like, What are you? Are you like literally a main character of this town? How does like everybody know who you are? It's so weird.
Just a completely different life.
Yeah, like we would just go to a random bar in like a town I've never been in and be like, hey, CeeLo, like who the fuck is this guy? How does this guy know you? What is this shit? Like,
yeah, no, I remember it was like when people talk about like, oh, we discovered that Keanu Reeves is immortal because we found exact pictures of him from 200 years ago and so on. Like I looked at Facebook pictures from like 4 different friend groups and he was in all of them. And I didn't think any of them knew each other. There's just people that are like that. I am not lying.
It's so like CeeLo knows Max. Like it's so weird. Like how does he know someone that's like younger than him? And was like they never interacted. They didn't even go to the same school. Like that's crazy to me. Like sorry, that was like very real life, but specific. The point is that yeah, very specific. But there's like people that are like, how did you even meet this person? Like what is the like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon that had to have happened for you and this person to have interacted together? Like
there's only 1 degree of CeeLo.
Yeah, it feels like that sometimes. Where I'm like, what happened? What like what? How did I miss out? But it's weird. It's more Uh, I don't know how to describe it. It's like it's more weird to me when I think about how like every video game does do that and it feels more natural there. But when it happens to me in real life, it feels really unnatural. But like that should probably be how communities are. Like I think you you should probably know the people in your community. But it's like somehow to me it seems like such a weird foreign idea. Like,
Whenever a
I
food
know who I
place,
am.
whenever the person at a food place starts remembering my name, I stop going there.
Yeah, exactly. That's like
Like
that,
I don't
that's
like
a normal
that. I don't
reaction.
like the fact that I've been here enough that you remember me.
I can't really
Makes you
speak
feel
'cause I
guilty
think
about ordering the same thing every time.
I need to rethink my. I've had cases, yeah, where like they know my order too well, and so in some there's been even been cases where I've gotten free food from some places because they saw me and just started making the thing that I order usually in advance, and then I didn't order that, so they just gave me both.
Oh no.
Oh, that's win.
That's pretty
That's
good, though.
win right there. Yeah.
I
No,
I
I
can't
recall.
really speak
I
because yeah. We'll go for it.
I definitely recall Keith playing Morrowind, entering like these tiny little rooms in Vivek, I think. And then there's 3 NPCs right at the door. So as the game loads, there's this Argonian being like, "Rawr, rawr," and everybody talking at the same time, and he just like, because you got a very specific sound that you make. But then the Breton, I don't know if it's a Breton, but there's this one female voice actress that has very long lines. So they all speak at the same time, but the last one is like this.
But she just
talking
keeps
like this.
going longer than
She
everyone.
keeps going for a little while. Yeah. It's just the hello lines that people say.
Yeah. I don't understand how those games get out in those states. Like, it's
They
just
don't think like they don't see.
I don't get it.
The developers just don't think that's just the thing that their game does, and
I
it's
think
It's
there's
just
a lot of,
so
like-
it's just so obviously incredibly jank that I'm like, why wouldn't you like
they don't have the pulse
getting
for jank.
getting into one game feels weird. The fact that it keeps being like that for several games, I'm just like, how does this not bother you at some point?
There's
I think it's
for
more
me, for
following
example,
orders. Like someone says that's what they
for
want,
sure.
and so you just
Yeah,
do
yeah.
it, and you're not gonna like. At some level, you're not gonna
You're not
question.
gonna
You're like,
question, yeah.
fine, if you want to make your own grave, like I'm not. You know,
But
I'm
I
not
also think that
responsible.
I also think that it takes a different perspective to come to to realize that it's janky. Like for example, the thing that drives me up the wall on Bethesda games, in particular, is that they record the same line across multiple voice actors and have multiple characters say the same line. So the whole "I used to be a warrior like you, but then I took an arrow to the knee" has like 5 different people saying the same line. Why didn't they write multiple lines and have 5 different people say multiple lines? Why didn't they do
It
that?
always drives me crazy. I had
I
a
think I know
scene
why they didn't
in
do it.
Kingdoms of Amalur where I freed 2 rebels or whatever, and then they just fucking stand there. And I talked to one of them, and he says an automatic little line it's just throwaway line. And then I talked to the woman, and she says the same line, but in her voice. Then I talk to the man again, and he says a new line. Then I talk to the woman, and she says the same line in her voice. Like they're cycling through the same lines in the same order, but they're recorded across multiple voice actors, and it's so weird because it's fucking bizarre that they would like coincidentally say the same things as each other. Like when you hear the same line from the same voice actor in random bullshit dialogue, you're just kind of like, okay, whatever. It's just limited variety in the crowd. But when a different voice actor says the same list of lines, you're like, wait, now it's a thing because now they changed voices.
Oh, it's
but they
definitely a
haven't
thing.
changed the lines, so it's like way more of like a. Well, I mean, it's a thing, as in like you're not like. You can't dismiss it the same way you do the same voice actor saying the same line at random. You're just like, okay, they're random crowd people that don't matter. So they had the fact that they happen to say the same thing as each other is just like, yeah, it's like the limited variability. It's like when you fight a screen of 12 people that are the same kind of leather jacket in Fallout. But when you talk to a different character and they say the same weirdly specific line in a completely different voice, you're like, wait, what the fuck? Because now it feels like this is a world where everyone just says the weirdly specific thing as each other because they're not the same person. And that makes it
It's just
incredibly stranger.
It's the memes of Kingdom Amalur where people just
it's
say
one
the same
thing where it's like a greeting, but it's not a greeting, is it? Like they say like a weirdly specific lore tidbit or a very specific form of a thank you for saving them or some other really specific thing that isn't just like, oh yes, make her be with you or whatever. So like when you walk into a chantry in Dragon Age and they say the fucking generic greeting and then someone else also says the generic greeting, that's fine. But when they say an incredibly specific thing, like to the point where it's like random gossip, like they say that the blah 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 blah, it's like, why the fuck is that line recorded multiple times?
The reason I think is because of the whole. It's detached. The recording of lines is detached from the rest of the development, and so what they do is the writers write stuff, and obviously writing isn't free. It takes time and it takes work and it takes talent. But they write stuff, and then when they send, like, we have 100 lines, and when they send it to the recording booth, they don't have lines for different actors because when the lines were written, they didn't even have different actors. They didn't even know who was going to be cast. So all they have is just, okay, we have these lines. Let's have everybody record these lines. And we have a lot of voice lines and it's great. Instead of, sort of intermingling the recording process with the writing process at the same time, which is a lot more complicated because it requires different departments and not to mention scripting, because don't forget, just writing lines and recording them is only part of the job. Then you have to integrate them into quest lines, you have to script them into characters, and there's a bunch of other things. So it's just, I think it has to do with just the way the voice acting is so detached from the rest of game development, because oftentimes it's done by a different company. It's the publisher who does voice acting a lot of the times, so not even the developer. And I think that's the reason why that happens. But it's still so awkward and it's so weird.
It sounds really infuriating to not know what your main character is going to sound like until your main character just like until you hear it, I guess. Like you hear the lines being imported into the game and you're like, oh,
that's not how I drew him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I guess.
That's why they make a big kerfuffle sometimes about, oh, this character was written specifically for this voice actor. And if people don't know, wait, don't you always do that? Because maybe you should always do that. Sometimes it's good to leverage the talent.
Yeah, usually, I mean, well, video games are not Hollywood movies, so they don't follow the same conventions, just the same costs.
I think even Hollywood movies are oftentimes not written for specific actors, only like main characters. Like they write the thing and then cast. Also because they can just afford casting whoever.
Wait, are you talking about like writing every role for the voice actor?
No, yeah, probably they wouldn't do that, right? In Hollywood.
Oh yeah, that would be very extenuous. Like especially considering they often don't play even enough of a role to get enough characterization for that to be a possibility. Like how would you? I don't even know. Like, how would you characterize?
Yeah, it would be difficult. But the thing,
I'm trying to think,
because then they would have to, the writers would have to work with the voice actors to know, or rather with the actors to know what they're like and learn them for every character. And but the thing in games is, like, you have 100 lines written for random NPC dialogue, and you don't know how many voice actors you're gonna have. If you at least had an idea, okay, well, I'm going to have 10 voice actors for random NPC dialogues. Let's assign certain lines for certain voice actors and at least work with that. But I think that even the problem is that they don't know how many voice actors they're going to have for random NPCs. That's something decided after the fact or whatever. I don't know. It's complicated because it's
you've
something
got like
Bethesda.
A pool.
I think it's something Bethesda specifically does. I haven't seen many other companies do that, apart from Kingdoms of Amalur as an example. But again, they have Bethesda-itis, so it's complicated. Like Obsidian didn't do that in their games. In their
they've been infected by their Bethesda.
They did it in New Vegas for sure. Oh man, it's so infuriating. New Vegas.
I imagine New Vegas had a lot. It's like similar to making a Nintendo game, or like when you make like a Samus or whatever. Like I imagine somebody from Bethesda was like breathing over their shoulder and being like, "You guys are missing a lot of NPC dialogue." Like,
Yeah, but they saw the light of day with Fallout 4, because in Fallout 4 you can't talk to a bunch of characters. Like it's just better to
talking,
it's better to
quote unquote.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters just on that dialogue.
Yes.
I think it's better. It's so much better to have a world where not everybody wants to talk to you, right?
I mean, that's a real world.
That's a real world, right? It's much better.
I just feel really fatigued when I walk into an area and it's just like, all right, let's talk to 70 people.
Like, that's like my hugest
and they all bring up like a
turn-off,
full dialogue window, and I'm like, because I fucking guarantee you, like, they don't have anything interesting to say. Like, that's the problem. Like, it becomes a chore. It's like, oh wow, there might be one. And I, like, when I'm doing a let's play, I'm like, do I fucking exhaust all of these people's dialogue just to find like the one piece of dialogue that's new they might have somewhere in their 7 options that's technically unique or something? Like, there's somebody that goes through and complains I'm skipping all the dialogue in Kingdoms of Amalur, and I'm like, I'm not. I'm listening to all the actual dialogue, but then it gives me this list of codex entries to click on, and not only do they almost never actually say anything of substance, they say the same things as each other. And I'm like, why did you bother recording the same pieces of boring lore with like 12 voice actors and stuff? And it's like, there could just be fewer NPCs, dudes. Like, you don't need so many fucking characters if you're not interested in actually doing anything with any of them.
And then
that's why then it would feel like an RPG.
Yeah, that's why Disco Elysium is such a gem, by just being like one square block of a town.
Yeah, Disco Elysium is sort of, you do talk to everybody, but all of them have hours and hours of interesting dialogue that is just enthralling.
And they're all different people. Like, everyone in Disco Elysium is a person. Like,
and it's because they make that the entire world, instead of being like, and that's one that's one town you're supposed to run through in 10 minutes, but we fucking made 700 lines of dialogue that go nowhere.
But then you have things like Planescape Torment or Tides of Numenera as well, where there's a lot of characters. Most of them don't talk, and the ones that do talk, you talk with them for hours and hours and hours and hours. And it's like long dialogues. Like the intro of Planescape Torment is, in my recollection, 3 or 4 hours easily, and you don't leave the room. You don't even fight or anything. You're just talking to your companion, and there's some zombies and there's some puzzles, and it's just like setting the tone for a game where you're gonna spend hours reading massive amount of dialogue. And that's the other extreme.
I hate the sound of that. That sounds honestly quite awful.
I'll get around to it at some point. It's supposed to be one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, it's pretty good, but it also has some down times and some things that are like
all-time great at keeping me away from it. I don't want that.
I honestly thought Tides of Numenera was better. A lot of the character, well, basically every character at least makes an effort of being like characterful in a way. Like, I don't remember a single character being like, I'm here to do this job. And Planescape Torment does that a lot. There's a lot of characters that are there to either convey to you an idea or whatever, or get you through a certain part of the setting or be part of a quest. And I think Tides of Numenera is like, oh, there's this fun character that has a demon in her pocket. It's really fun, and you're gonna like her. There's this one that's really goofy, but also is evil. There's this one that is super evil, but he's super well written, and it sounds like death metal every time he says anything. It's like some of the Tides of Numenera is amazing, and I honestly think that one character that sounds like death metal every time he says something is the best character I've ever read in a computer game. I forget his name though. I know the name of the writer though. Eric Shoemaker.
I find it interesting that there's no consensus on Numenera.
People don't know what they like. I mean, they do know what they like.
Wildly change the answer. Well, I think it's partly just that, like even the fact that I said, like, oh, it's one of the all-time greats, even though I haven't even fucking played the game about Planescape Torment. It's like,
oh, right.
I'm just echoing the same idea. Like, certain things just get canonized into being the best things ever in a way that can't necessarily really be true in a lot of the cases. And it's like, it's the Star Wars thing and it's the Ocarina of Time thing and so on, where it's like, It's like, oh yeah, Empire Strikes Back, best movie ever. And like, there's literally no thing anyone could ever do with Star Wars that would ever let anyone think like, no, like, there will never be a point where they're like, oh, this new trilogy that was made by who and ho, whatever the fuck, 70 years later, that's finally better than the original trilogy of Star Wars. It will literally never happen. And it doesn't matter how, that doesn't actually speak to the quality of the movies being made now. It's just the fact that you can't stop it. Like I had this no, what was this fucking comment that I got today? On the fucking, oh wait,
it's
no,
always a comment. It's always one of you people have dumb ideas. Like,
it was a comment on my Zelda remix video. It wasn't on Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time will forever look down upon every other Zelda title and fan as the GOAT. It's cute that you have your own favorite game. That's cool, but people will keep going back to Ocarina of Time while the other games fade. And it's like I've gotten like a variation of that comment every week, like since I ever got specifically inserted into any of the conversations around Zelda. It's like people are still so fucking obsessed with Ocarina of Time, and it's like it's basically flawless by any estimation somehow. And it's like, and of course it's not. Of course it's not. It's got all sorts of problems. But like that's just what happens.
What? I mean, it does have some of the best characters. But
you just hear certain buzzes happen, like certain rumblings where people repeat the certain opinions just enough that it becomes like, yeah, no, this is the all-time great movie or whatever, or this is the all-time great game, and it's like inescapable at some point, and it just has this gravity of people repeating the idea enough that it has to be true.
I definitely remember playing Ocarina of Time when I was young, and being really tripped up by a lot of stuff. There was like stuff that just I didn't intuitively understand, and it like took me a while to get through it. And there are things I appreciate about the game. Like there are some genuinely good stuff in Ocarina of Time, but I think Ocarina of Time is a masterpiece when you like cut time around it. So when you take, you like your cake, and you cut a perfect slice out of time and take Ocarina of Time out of that and be like, look at this game in this exact time period. You go, wow, yeah, like for 1998, that's a pretty damn good 3D fucking RPG, not RPG, whatever you want to call it, adventure game. It's like a really good 3D adventure game. If you compare that to like Legend of Zelda on the NES, it's like such a good, it's like a perfect like 1-to-1, right? You pick up and go like, wow, it is just like this. It feels like you're on a grand adventure on a huge map in a huge world. That's awesome. That's what it should feel like. But it doesn't make it. I don't think Ocarina of Time is like somehow flawless. I don't think it makes it immune from. I don't think it makes it like unable to be rusty and old and gross looking. At the same time, I think it's like it. It also isn't like the best Zelda game they've ever made either. I will honestly think it's Breath of the Wild will be the best Zelda game that they've ever made. Just because that is, I imagine Breath of the Wild is exactly what they wanted The Legend of Zelda to be, but they couldn't.
Those generally seem to be like the point of it was to essentially go back to the original Zelda and recapture the original point to an extent. Down to the point of including Lionel's as if like to make a point.
Yeah, like, and I'm like, that's what I'm saying is like, I think you can look at a real, like a quote unquote masterpiece Zelda game by just taking it and holding it up against The Legend of Zelda and going like, hey, does this fit Miyamoto's like weird, trippy drug dream? And you smash them together and you're like, yeah, actually this does go together really well. Like, hey, that's crazy that you meet an old man and he says it's dangerous out there. Here, take this. And they're like, both games have that. Like,
yeah, I don't think intent matters for quality.
No, but I don't think intent. I'm not saying that intent matters for quality. I'm saying that I think you can tell there tends to be a commonality for like when people say like this is the best Zelda game. It tends to be one that captures what the purpose of the first Zelda game was, which is supposed to be a fun and exciting adventure through a world that you have no fucking idea. I mean,
look at Resident Evil and see what people say tends to be the best one. And none of the best ones are the ones that captured the original intent.
The supposedly best Resident Evil is completely divergent from the rest of the franchise.
Yeah, like Resident Evil has a story though, and Zelda's story is like literally copy paste every single game. So I think it's a little hard to compare the two, just because I think you'll find people that have like big narrative objectives to like Resident Evil 7 versus like Resident Evil 2. People will be like, I don't think or 6, sorry, I was thinking of 6. It's like, I don't think 6 really qualifies as a good Resident Evil game when you have like fucking Resident Evil to look at. But at the same time, there's probably people who are like, Resident Evil 7 doesn't fit in with like the Biohazard lore. Like, I don't know. It's just, there's so many conflicting tones to Resident Evil games, where Zelda's pretty consistent. It's just like, yeah, there's a really angry tan man in the desert, and like, can we stop that guy? He's really a problem. Except for the ones where he's actually a pig instead. Can you still stop him though? He's still over there being a problem. Like every Zelda game is pretty consistent in its narrative, and it's like, yeah, there happens to be a blonde elf girl who, you know, is a princess. You should probably also make sure she's okay or doesn't need anything.
The quality of any game, it doesn't have to be an old game, but I think of particularly old games, this is more relevant, what I'm about to say, but the quality of any game in general is heavily dependent on what you're willing to forgive. And not any game can be great. Not like, you can't look at a game that is just, you know, meh, that doesn't really stand out for anything, and be like, okay, I'm gonna forgive this and this and this and this, and what is left is amazing, right? And so sometimes you have games that do things really poorly, like Vampire Bloodlines, for example. But there's things
let me talk
where
to you
it's
about
really
combat.
But it does the other things that are kind of good. They're pretty good. They're good. I mean, maybe they're not the best thing. I don't think I love Vampire Bloodlines, but it's not the best thing that ever happened in the history of humankind. But if you forgive the combat, for example, and other things, there's plenty of things that you need to forgive for Vampire Bloodlines. A lot of people see it with fondness and say, this is amazing, and I love it. Like, anytime I go back to play it, it's like, oh, this is great, because nostalgia plays a big role in that, obviously, but also the art direction. I just really like it, and I like the spirit of the game, the sort of the heart that it has. But I'm forgiving so many other things, and that happens with Fallout 1 and 2. That happens with
Like, it's why there's just different kind of fans, basically, and the kind that gonna say weirdly erases problems is so frustrating. I love Mass Effect 1 so much, and I also know that back when I played it a lot, I was like a Mass Effect evangelist and would loan people my collector's edition tin copy of the game to play it, and every single one of them couldn't get past the Citadel. They just literally could not figure out how to get on the Normandy. Like, they could. That was not happening.
Oh yeah, because the elevator's in the middle of a level.
No, it's the fact that you have to figure out how to find the council and have the tribunal with the council where you tell them about Saren. Then you have to go on and gather evidence against Saren, so you have to find Tali in that one alleyway and so on, and over the course of that you meet like Rex and Garrus and so on.
Because the elevator, the CSEC elevator, is in the middle of the hallway. Do you remember?
No, it's not that specifically, like, it's not that they can't find the elevator, it's that that part of the game requires you to want to explore the Citadel.
Oh, right, I see what you mean. It's like the mindset for a role-playing game.
Yeah, like the beginning of Mass Effect is a hallway. You run forward, and then Leroy Jenkins dies, and you run forward, and you find Ashley, and you run forward, and there's a guy that's like, oh, I saw Saren be evil, and you run forward, and there's more Geth, and you run forward, and there's like a long, then you get to the conduit, and the conduit, or is it called?
You see that thing? Yeah, it's like a siphon thing, or
the cipher, or whatever the fuck, and it gives you a vision, and then cutscenes, you're on the Citadel, and now you're on the Citadel, and it's like, okay, so here's the Presidium. Good luck.
Yeah.
Over
it's not
there
even that big of an area.
Over there is Flux. There's an upper decks and a lower decks. There's CSEC. There's the embassies. There's the hangar. There's the entire area surrounding the council. You go meet the Hanar and the Volus, which will never matter in the actual story, but they're fun to meet. And yeah, like if you're me, you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna go into this embassy and I'm gonna find out why all these people are mad at humans and stuff, and we're gonna get this big complex setup for this world, and it's all these different characters that are well defined, and it's gonna be a great time. But if you're like a random person that was given a copy of this game, you're like, I'm lost. I'm lost and everything's white. And whenever I get out of an elevator, it's 30 seconds long.
Yeah, that's not a great decision. I think
Mom,
it's
come pick me up. I'm scared.
Well, that used to be how long it took to load. The 360 did not have good load times.
Yeah,
it does
Mass
not.
Effect
No.
2.
It's
Mass
just
Effect
now
2
the game can't
also
load
doesn't
faster because the elevators are hard coded.
Mass Effect 2 has long load times on my system. I think it's just it's probably single core, like it's not taking advantage of modern computers.
Oh, you're talking about PC?
Yeah. It like probably 10 seconds load times, which is long.
10 seconds.
On the Xbox, it was probably 10 minutes. Am I right?
Yeah, pretty much. It was literally long enough to have a conversation.
Oblivion.
Yeah.
The Oblivion loading screen on Xbox 360. Just watching that fucking pip slowly fill that little bar with orange over the course of what felt like minutes. Like it would just
so
stop
fast
moving for an eternity.
It was so fast on PC, even at the time. I had a crappy PC, and it was so fast. Like my Morrowind would load slower than Oblivion on PC at the time.
It was a nightmare.
God,
I 100%ed it.
I finished The Witcher 1. I finished The Witcher 1 on that computer that played Oblivion when it came out, and the load times were long. And I had my acoustic guitar at the time next to me, and every time I had to load, I would just play a little. And that's how I learned to play guitar. Playing The Witcher 3.
Just playing The Witcher.
Because the load times were enormous. Every time you died, it was just like, okay, well, I guess it's another minute and a half.
What a ritual to have.
What a glowing review of the game.
It's better than when games had to be loaded onto a cassette or from a cassette or whatever. 45 minutes of load times.
I guess. I don't think that's a really good comparison. I think the expectation would be that like the medium at which you must distribute media can keep up with the scope of what you're putting onto it. So like ideally in tape media, you're not putting on video games that require like 15 minutes of load time, right? It should just be enough.
I think it was a lot, like 45 minutes rather than 15. I've never had any machine like that, but I remember hearing people talk about enormous load times.
I mean, there's
like that.
I remember installing video games could sometimes take 45 minutes, but once the game was installed.
I'm talking about like in the Spectrum or before the Spectrum, it would tape like cassettes.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? We were too young.
I didn't play much. I played like a Commodore 64, but I don't remember it being like I don't remember it being bad enough.
The Commodore used what did it use for loading?
Tapes.
Was it zip?
I believe.
Tapes? I don't know. I've never seen any one of those. Any of that old stuff.
Yeah.
Basically,
it had a tape
never
drive,
made
literally a cassette tape drive.
So maybe that is what I'm thinking of.
It was an awful nightmare, but like the idea. Or I'm sorry. I'm trying to find what they look like, but it's hard to.
Looks like we got to wrap up this week.
We do.
Looks like we're doing Final Fantasy after all.
Are we?
Oh.
Sounds like it, unless you already made plans.
Oh, did he get a subscription?
Yep, I think it's happening.
Oh. Okay.
All right. That's the end of the podcast.
Alrighty,
Final Fantasy 17. Wait, how many?
14.
14, that's the one.
Yep.
You should play
their cartridges.
Escape Torment, though.
Podcast is slowly petering out in silence.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought we were going to say goodbye.
Yeah, so
loading. He was looking something up.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. I'm done. Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Playing games. Goodbye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Download your games from cassettes.
Don't do
that. And brush your teeth.
Brush your cassettes.
with cassettes.
Magnetize your cassettes.
Oh God. Okay,
With
now
your
this
teeth.
is getting into dangerous advice.
Magnetic teeth fillings on cassettes.
I'm gonna get demonetized.
Demagnetized, more like it.